introductions, and let's start with the folks on Zoom first. Then we'll go to Aaron and we'll go around.
Hi, I'm Kevin Muller-Liley, Senior Manager with Moss Adams.
I'm Jody Birch, a citizen member of the Deschutes Audit Committee.
I'm Kathleen Hinman, HR Director here at Deschutes County.
Can we start over? The remote volume in this room was turned down.
Kevin Muller-Liley with Moss Adams.
Can you hear us? Can you guys hear us now?
Not quite.
No? Okay.
This one?
How about now?
There we go, okay.
That's the right button. So I'm Kevin Muller-Liley with Moss Adams.
I'm Jody Birch, citizen member of the Deschutes County Audit Committee.
Kathleen Hinman, HR Director at Deschutes County.
Aaron K, Performance Auditor, Deschutes County.
Summer Sears, I'm a member of the committee.
Daryl Parrish, public member.
Scott Wright, Public Member.
Robert Pinto, Chief Financial Officer. Lee Randall, County Member of the Committee for Facilities.
County Administrator.
Gianna King, Controller.
Dave Gibbons, County Internal Auditor, and I will also share my cake with Scott Wright. This is his last audit.
Oh,
I'm Patty Dare, Deschutes County Commissioner.
Yeah. Eric, Deputy County Administrator. So that's everyone. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the external audit plan for fiscal year 22. And that's Moss Adams will present that. Kevin, I imagine that's you.
Yeah, that's right. It'll just be me today. Amanda McCleary Moore is the audit partner. Fortunately, Amanda's teaching an OSCPA class that's all day today, which is a big effort. I've done sessions for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I can't imagine doing 8 hours, but that was a commitment she already made. So it'll just be me today, and I'll share my screen, or actually it's disabled. Can someone allow me to share so I can project my slide deck?
Can you do it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Can everyone see that all right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Well, this is Moss Adams' second year auditing the county, and we're really looking forward to taking everything we learned in year one and moving forward and serving the county. So the key team members here, again, Amanda's the partner who signs the report. I help Amanda doing a lot of the review and overseeing our team. And Ashley Austin's a audit partner in Portland that Amanda and I work with a lot. You won't see her, but she's going to do a high-level review of the audit plan, our reports, and your financial statements before we issue everything. And also returning this year, Teddy Howard is the manager that will oversee the staff again this year. So everyone that was on the first year audit is returning. So the audit standards say that the auditor needs to communicate in an entrance manner the audit plan up front, and also on the back end, go over the audit results. Obviously, that's the most important piece. But I really appreciate that the audit committee and members of management provide us time to do that in person. Audit standards say you could do that by way of a letter, but I think this is much better. So thanks for taking time to do that today. Moss Adams' responsibilities are to audit your financial statements to make sure that they're in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Your team does a great job preparing an ACFR, the annual comprehensive financial report. So we have some additional review there to make sure that you continue receiving that award of excellence from the Government Finance Officers Association. And we'll conduct our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and generally accepted government auditing standards. We'll be looking at internal controls to make sure all the checks and balances are there, not only over your financial statements and transactions, but also over your federal awards to make sure that compliance is occurring for those programs. In terms of the financial statements, we kind of break up our audit into three places that we can achieve audit reliance on. The first is the internal controls. Really looking forward to this year because we put a lot of time last year into documenting your internal controls, meeting with members throughout the county. And this year we can take all that documentation, use that as a starting point, and then see what we documented, is that continuing to occur? And we'll do that by kicking the tires, walking through transactions to make sure that what we understand to be the process continues to be so. The other two places are more tests that we'll do at the end of the engagement when we have your draft financial statements. We'll get audits reliance by either performing analytical procedures, is where we look at your revenues, your expenditures, develop an independent expectation, and then compare it to your recorded balances. If we're not going to go that route, we'll do something called substantive procedures. This is probably what you think more of an audit, where we're looking at invoices, we're looking at cash receipts, bank statements, and also confirming balances with third parties, such as your cash or investments and outstanding debt. And by doing a little bit of all these different audit tests, that's ultimately how we're able to opine on the county's financial statements. Now, in our audit, we're not looking, is something off a dollar? What we're concerned about are material misstatements. And materiality to us is what would a financial statement user consider to be a material error. So maybe a bond rating agency is looking at your financial statements, members of the community, the state of Oregon certainly looks at financial statements by the way of the audits division. So we calculate materiality, usually a small percentage of your total assets, total expenditures, something of that nature. And we apply that to all of your different opinion units throughout the financial statement. So your general fund, your road fund, and so forth. Want to share with you what we consider to be the significant audit areas this year. And here's those five, I would say the top 5 areas. We're going to test a number of different balances to make sure they're materially correct. But these, I think, are the 5 areas of focus this year. The first one is really, it's because it's something new. The county is going to be implementing GASB Statement 96 this year. That's on subscription-based IT technology arrangements. So last year, leases was implemented, leasing buildings, leasing equipment, things like that. This is very similar, but now we're talking about IT subscriptions that the county has. So maybe the sheriff has a particular subscription for how they conduct their business. So it's going to be really important for management to talk with all the different departments throughout the county to understand what sort of arrangements they have out there. And I know Jana on your team was at the GFOA conference last week or 2 weeks ago. And there was a really good session on how to implement this new accounting standard. So I think we're in a good position to get this going this year. Audit standards say that revenue recognition is a critical matter that always has to be considered a significant risk. So we'll be putting emphasis on your intergovernmental agreements, charges for services, property taxes, all the different revenues that the county has. I believe there was a immaterial error last year. It was small enough that we were able to pass on it. So we've talked to management about how we can identify those a little earlier in the audit. So because management actually did want to correct that immaterial matter, and I appreciate them wanting to really fine tune the financial statements, even if it's something that's immaterial. Capital assets over the course of my career is where the biggest material misstatements occur. Those are the biggest dollars. You know, your finance team isn't out there working on infrastructure projects, so it's very decentralized. And sometimes I've seen that the miscommunication between finance and public works or other departments causes those sorts of misstatements. So that's a significant area for us. Making sure that bonds payable are correctly reported. That piece is usually pretty straightforward, but there are a lot of disclosures that are required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So we'll spend time there. And then the fifth significant area is compliance with laws and regulations. That's both your federal programs and then the Oregon minimum standards. We also put an emphasis on considering how fraud could be conducted and go undetected at the county. So we try to detect fraud in a number of different ways. Our team will brainstorm, so we'll get together before we really begin your audit and think about everything we learned last year. Think about, you know, things in the industry, economic environment, and think of ways where we can identify fraud. We also conduct interviews with management. We'll talk with internal auditor because ultimately we're only at the county for a few weeks out of the year, and the Certified Fraud Examiners Association tells everyone that a tip internally at the client is the number one way that an external auditor identifies fraud. We'll also design some procedures that we didn't necessarily do this year, just to keep things fresh so management doesn't assume they know kind of what our audit plan is. And then finally, journal entries are another critical piece that the audit standards say auditors really need to do a lot of work on to make sure that journal entries aren't made to conceal fraud. We've already done some discussions with Robert and Jenna and team to talk about the audit plan, and that's laid out right here. So we have this meeting here on June 9th. Our team will be on site initially the week of Labor Day to do our internal control testing. And then we'll be back the following month, mid-October. And actually, I see an error in there. It says October 16th to November 30th. That would be a lot of time in the field. That should be to October 30th. So we have 3 weeks planned on site. And then October 30th is when we plan to get the initial draft of the ACFR from the county. So that's kind of basically in the middle of our final field work. I think final field work probably goes through the first week of November. And then this year, we're planning to issue the audit reports by November 30th. So that would be a big jump from last year. I believe we issued on December 20th this year. Worked with a number of clients on making some incremental changes. So I do know that 3 weeks or so is a significant increase, but right now that's both what management and Moss Adams is shooting for. And then that would set us up to go over the audit results with you in December. So that's really the audit plan. In terms of new accounting standards, I already talked about GASB Statement 96. There is another big one out there. I don't know that it necessarily impact you this year. That's on public-private and public partnerships and availability payment arrangements. So if the county is doing any large contracts where maybe someone else is constructing an asset for them or operating an asset for them, that's when we'd want to talk about how GASB Statement 94 is going to be implemented. For the most part, you end up putting an asset and a liability on your balance sheet. But so far in talking with management, they don't believe that's going to have an impact on their financial statements this year. This slide just points out we have a number of articles, webcasts, alerts that are coming out. Ashley Austin and I next month are giving a GASB update webcast that's available for anyone to join, and I believe that's at least one CPE credit out there. And here's where to contact Amanda and myself. So that's really the extent of my prepared slides, and I'll stop sharing.
Any questions for Kevin?
Kevin, I had a question. I got a couple of service districts contact me about getting their reports in a more timely manner. Can you talk to how you're going to address that going forward?
Yeah, so last month we issued a Sun River Service District. So I think that is already in place, and you've been on those communications, David. And then in Black Butte Ranch, I'm delivering the audit report Thursday of next week. And I've already talked, so they have a new administrative manager now as of, I believe, February. And I've already kind of set up the plan for her. I believe we're going to issue that audit by the end of October.
Do we have a plan with goals?
Yeah, so the Coles is the third audit that we're working on, and that one is still ongoing. Trying to work with Amanda to issue it by the end of June.
Is there a plan to try to get that pushed out like you did the other ones?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I can share the really heavy lifting on this is we're responsible. Well, we're not responsible, but we are contracted to draft the financial statements for all three of these. And in the first year of this, that does take a significant amount of time in addition to doing all of the audit pieces. So once we lay that groundwork moving forward, that's going to be much more straightforward.
I just have a couple of follow-up comments to make as well, and some information sharing. So, and just for the internal audit committees as well, information. Kevin and I and Janet, we did have some follow-up conversations about the timelines or timeliness. And Los Adams was really obliging and understanding. There were some challenges with some of the work coming back, but also other clients that they were working on. But we talked about our timelines, and that's why we usually agreed in with our timeline for next year. Moving it up, we coordinated our timeline with those. We have a good working relationship. As well. Just a couple of info items on, you mentioned regulatory and compliance is one focus area. It typically is. I just want to let you know that our budget committee this year has approved a new procurement position within the county, a centralized procurement person that will hire in the new fiscal year. So that should help us in some of the realm of compliance and regulatory work in that area. Specifically, also mentioning for the audit committee, one of those internal audit was around the munis implementation. There were quite a number of procurement related recommendations that were found in that report. So, and a lot of them were centered around. So we'll be able to, once this position is hired, address those. And so again, that speaks to the regulatory. And the last update, just one more moment if we can. I think Moss Adams would appreciate this as well. The budget committee also approved, again, both of these take forward adoption later this month. Approved a new software, so we are looking at an app for builder software, either for Kiva, Gravity, something like that. So we hope that will, when it comes time to auditing, the auditors will be able to just drill down on the numbers and have access to it. So it helps them in their audit as well as easier to compile the financial statements in a streamlined fashion, get away from those rounding numbers as well. So even though they don't focus on it, it's like, so we're hoping there's a number of improvements that will help not only auditors, but also in the internal audit. We have some recommendations that came through in our
The county staff expect to be on drafting the financial statements for those other people.
Well, we do that. The Janice team does that.
No, it's already complete.
Oh.
So their financial information is not in. Sometimes it's just easier. Yeah. I think if their information was in our system.
Polls was put their information. So that it's easier. They accepted the recommendation.
Anything else for Kevin? Kevin, thank you.
All right, thanks for everybody's time today and congratulations, David.
Well, in fact, that's during our
I just
introduction,
circled
so
it.
here they are, submitting the minutes for the March 10th meeting. Votes unless questions, additions, or subtractions. Seconds. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion. Move to approve. Time is all we're waiting for. Presentation.
Release this audit. We release this audit. So we found that police were working a lot of overtime. 1,000 hours. Which was equivalent to these overtime hours were affecting officers who were out on the street. Most hours of overtime is not any single officer. Was 97. Officers working with along with our the officers who work excessively. More time. Everyone. There was one who worked more than 20 hours more often than we do. Other cities have in Seattle, the work is Denver has a limit. Portland didn't have it. When we talk to staff at the Bureau, people from all levels, from out on the street officers up to the there's no use of that. All of our overtime. So we hire more people. This is the information we share with city council. Personal shortage was the biggest cause. We found that recently. The Bureau submitted that. They categorize which projects. Would have been people who were hired if shifts were not staffed. But we found that wasn't always the case. So it included some shifts where sergeants had minimum set. No like strategy for when that was used. Also, some portion of this group that we documented shifts. Hours, overtime hours, where the shift was actually staffed. We found that missing accurate data made it impossible for the Bureau to verify whether this number was correct and whether these shifts, which shifts were falling within. We're using overtime, personal shortage overtime, which started. Another thing we looked at was off-duty private employees. City of Portland allows officers to work overtime, including for private 19,000 hours of overtime for 80 the biggest employer using this was for the but we found that there were a lot of risks related to it. The first risk we saw was that secondary employment can generalize. Some of the staff complained to us that they were working for business owners who didn't want police to arrest people even. They said that owners really only wanted police there for visibility, not to perform that. And there were cases where members of the public observed people shoplifting and were asked to to not. There's also a risk for an appearance of political. One of the standards in approving the modification that it shouldn't be for a political. But we found an instance where a contract for the Oregon Liberty Alliance was denied for this purpose, for this reason, but a contract for the Southern Poverty Law was approved for very similar. There was also a risk that secondary employment could result in bias. And some managers said that they struggled with reconciling requests from private businesses, services, with the Bureau's approach to it. Finally, most interesting is that this caused a verdict, a financial verdict, was the ways that the private employers hours that the officers worked, but it did include an over such as the time managers versus others. Scheduling the officers, payroll, or billing. So we made recommendations for. So to make sure that all personnel shortage overtime implemented, and also to allow supervisors to better overtime. We recommended the Bureau create history reports, that they limit overtime, and that they improve data collection. So since 2019, the Bureau has improved data collection, oversight, and reporting, but it's still working to add some. And to ensure that their public benefit of secondary outweighs associated risks, we recommended that the contract approval process be centralized in the chief's office, that Bureau of hours work on the time, and that the Bureau work to create a rationale for overtime that include the cost of payroll process. Since 2019. The Bureau improved the secondary approval approval, the number of contracts out of work, and that's all I have to say about this part. But if anyone has questions.
With that audit, that the department asked to take out. And were there items that you agreed to take out, or any items and items that you didn't take out?
I don't think we've had a lot of discussions throughout the process about how we added objectives and it was very complicated. As you might have read, a lot of the recommendations are related. So, and one of the whether or not that personal shortage was really we're covering that tuition. So there was quite a bit of back and forth. Does this fall into that? Where, how does this stay where? That became kind of a weird process.
That process, I know that you had to talk something about the shift, the trade shifts. I think it's really difficult to analyze it. The records say Joe was really Sam picked it up. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, that wasn't happening, but I think one reason that we actually got two separate payroll systems. So the enterprise-wide payroll system everyone knows just what they're assigned to. We have another system, daily roster. That is the one we actually track. So I use the daily roster, verified it to SEO. The number of applications, but I didn't actually see that each person was using official financial system matched to the daily roster. I think by design it is hard to
So you did this report, what were the results? How did police management look at it, what they do about it?
Yeah, we got great results. We, I think, right after the report was really got it in. Always a great time to sign into. We got to design the system, also. Feedback on how. We set it up, so we actually ended up having talk through how they were implementing the recommendations with Word. Worked really well. It was like, there's a vision to have us with like ongoing conversation. Because we really do. But, keeping that in mind, I think it's successful. And like I said, almost all of the recommendations are discussed. Some of them are pretty serious, like which supervisors sign up on this are still not tracking data, and that just has to be not making the resources. Yeah, so a lot of times it can just show up and yeah, so this is tracking. This is tracking. I think this is tracking. There's a different bit there. This is. But we didn't focus. Focusing on personnel. That was all of, starting to, some of the recommendations discovering problems in the data.
So your main statement, management is lax. What kind of process? Evaluate how we audit.
No, I think it's not necessarily Portland auditor is elected, it was kind of a grand standard, grand standard. We wanted to have a big. This report is released. And I think we really really think about over time. Because it's a have a personnel short. They said that. Okay. So I think that I will really want to send a message that even need for overtime, that actually even part of it, part of it. So if you're getting skepticism, it really will.
Issuing a report, were there things that you were thinking you would have done differently?
Something did bother me. I thought there were much more. We had a new police chief, our city auditor, what she wanted. They had just. Big problem. Like, they're just, they have a personnel shortage. So I think if I had, right, it would be, this was a top, but in the top. That's where it was.
So then the obvious question is, what, if you had to make the decision, what would you do?
There were bigger. I really wanted to audit. A big issue. It kind of looked at racial bias within the that was what our. Another thing that I think I got at it a little bit. Since you're leading where they talk about police as a military organization, but I don't think that's true. But in police, we like this gut decision all the time on them, and they don't get a situation. So low level sergeants just, I mean, where I don't make it easier for me if we work on the ship. Personnel overtime, because I do this instead of that being a decision we get. How many people should.
So what would you audit?
It's hard without, doing the whole risk assessment. they weren't following up on that. The details of what I was. They weren't checking the city. Other than that. I said recommendations wrong. There was one, the recommendation that I was. Is that that's a union issue. I think that's what our recommendation was, and then our recommendation. They did bring it to the party.
Well, from the section that I was in. Yeah, I can just, I can ask a question, just to elaborate a little bit. You mentioned that, you know, kind of predetermined outcomes, which you, finding like the early interval, you described the methodology on kind of high level that there's material findings result. So there was just a question developers spent early still has some distance to go to complete the process. So if you just elaborate.
So I didn't mention that exact context, but yeah, I guess it was kind of my answer is not. As I sort of growing as an auditor, I constantly realized the importance of sort of going back to the practice and going back to the early on to kind of the approach on it, which makes it go makes it easier to have. So we do a risk assessment. We as auditors, we're not, one of the things is, I think I mentioned too, one of the things that another way that we just have to follow the process. No, another way we're different is start with the risk assessment. So we aren't going, and I tell this to my audit. This audit is probably not going to fit right into because we have a very limited amount of time. So right from the beginning of risk assessment, we're doing work so that it's on track. We're not going to do that. That's fair. I get it, but also there's a reason. Auditors have high salaries and so in the beginning, I think we have to bring some sense that these are the and put together my proposal to the city auditor. I had this whole hypothetical. I know what the criteria is, and I say, you know, the condition is. Cause is something that I familiarize myself with. this is where it gets very. Um, That's sort of how I formed the objectives and the. So, you know, I guess it just experience and time and we different. That sort of sense of how things work here. This is what this is, I think this is what's going. Kind of like when you're designing a scientific experiment, you have a hypothesis. So this is what we're testing. This is going to, and that doesn't mean it's fair or the results are predetermined. It's just the way to provide this.
It's very clear we have more time, and so with that, so. Sorry, that's what we need to go over questions, and we can maybe just do our point.
You all.
I'll turn it back over to Chair.
Actually, it's tough.
Hey, Aaron. I'm not sure if it's just on like my end, but the audio seems pretty quiet to me. I'm not sure if like the mic maybe isn't.
Yeah, we had to position the mic a little bit closer to this end, just because of the cord length, so.
Okay.
I apologize if it was so quiet.
Questions for Elizabeth from Jody or someone else?
Sorry, Daryl.
Or
We're
is
trying
it?
to-
Oh. Hi, Jody, can you hear me? Oh, shoot.
Not really. It's pretty quiet. I think I have my volume all the way up and stuff too. I could hear Kevin just fine. I don't know, but Kathleen's on her side. She might be a good control.
Same as you, Jody. Yeah.
Questions or not? Did you hear the presentation that the candidate was doing?
I mean, not well. I could only get a few words generally. It's just quiet. Like it's almost like that mic isn't turned on because even you, like Daryl, I can hear you, but like I have my audio all the way up and it's light.
This one?
It's better.
It's still pretty light. I feel like it's the hearing test, kind of like, can you hear a beep? It's like I can hear some noise, but but I don't know what the beep is saying very well.
The doctor will want to see you for a consultation.
Yeah.
Okay, so you probably didn't hear the presentation loud where.
No, not enough to like have an opinion on.
Okay, we'll just move on.
Yes.
What we can do maybe is, I would say, we should make copies of what she did give us as a because it's fascinating what her audit work did come with in 2018's numbers. And then, you know, it's
Yeah.
really, it's very beneficial.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So maybe some copies. Is it online? Okay, so you should go online then, Jody.
Let's move on to the next slide. There's a lot of report findings text. Okay.
Jody, can you see that screen okay? Or Kathleen? Jody or Kathleen, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Sorry, yes, I was giving a thumbs up.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, go ahead and proceed. So this audit was part of our ongoing fiscal reviews for county operations. Some aspects of the fiscal review for this department had already happened as part of the implementation and some treasurer transitions. So this audit was focused solely on controls over receipts, city finance, and department as well. All finance, but let's go through some of the graphics that were in the report, the things that I thought were interesting. The pie chart on the left, which about 97% of the department receipts coming as unsegregated tax. The transit room tax gets us up to 99.9%. So finance is only handling 0.1% of India funds that come through taxes, tax collection. Almost 100% of and then on the right, there, on the right, you can see just a steady growth of the unsegregated tax collections. A good portion of that is 70%. And then it's not on this presentation, but one of the other interesting pieces I found was that 93% of the tax November window again, with that 3% is higher than I had expected. Yeah, it's great. A lot of responsible people in the county, exactly.
No, they wouldn't just.
Yeah,
And that's like the people that go to,
cheapskates.
yeah, and that's why they go to fire free, because it's free.
This one is some graphics on transit room tax in the background there. We saw quite a bit of an uptick there in the last 2 years as tourist industry in Deschutes County is flourishing quite well. It's driven around trying to get from one side of the town to the other. That's two. Projections, I think this year we're coming in at level or maybe slightly below. Remember right from the and then the last chart is kind of a jump ahead, but it was a graphic I wanted just to include with all the other graphics. This was the number of entities that have been audited by our external audit contract or TRT. And we saw it go to 0 over fiscal years 20 through 22. Most of that is due to a transition to a new tax software system that really didn't have comfort in the numbers. So we paused those audits. So on to the recommendations. We ended up with 4 recommendations for this audit. The first one is kind of surrounding front counter staff. So closing out their tills and handing over control of that money without recount forms. And in the recount of that money was performed separately. Wanted to have rule is that recount just in case there were any discrepancies. Good events for your money. There hadn't been any discrepancies in the past. There was a lot. The second one was the department had some delayed reconciliations in the audit period. Started taking into account that indicated that that particular bank account was combining refunds and returns from both the unsegregated tax and some of the transactions were made harder because the payment processor gave only batch information. So they really had to piece through those more later. The bank account was created prior to positive pay, and it was meant to be a function to separate those physical barriers, separate those accounts from the refunds, so that there was no way bad actor could get in the cycle of the thing. So that was a good reason to establish that, but now that we have positive pay, our recommendation is to evaluate the need for that. As previously mentioned, the transit impacts their audits, those audits, events, going again to make sure that taxpayers were paying their fair share of tax, as well as if there were any overpayments. So, could it also include some hours of internal audit work, non-audit work? More on that to come, I'm sure. Finally, prior audit work had identified that there was no management review procedure for adjustments to the property tax system. The recommendation had been addressed in the past sufficiently by prior management. That process is never documented sufficiently. Yeah. Since the departments have a lot of change in personnel and accounting systems, that review process was lost. So we didn't have any concerns about any of the adjustments that we had during the period of review. They were all appropriate, but the loss of the process led us to make it documented. And then we also we included some relevant prior fiscal audit recommendations made towards finance policy improvements, noted in CBP action in 2020, ticketing in 2021, that still had yet to be resolved under the prior CFO, and I think Robert was actively working towards updating some of those policies. Overall, for the amount of money that is coming into the department and all the receipts that are being handled, they did a great job. Most of them not the ones. So, great audit. Finance is a great helpful. I do want to make note also that the tax staff and the assessor's office staff obviously work close together, and they've implemented this kind of shared document system within our shared drive, so that we can track individual tax payment adjustments. So there's great communication going on between these two departments that are physically separated, but are working together on some. Just thought it was a great example of collaboration for existing needs, by extra software. Robert, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'll just add, I appreciate the work from the internal team, and Aaron was really collaborative, and he was so mindful of our staff. Who was also, I think, sitting here one of the deadlines of the meeting.
It was the March.
March deadline. So it was really conscientious, working with staff at a time that worked best for them. So that was nice. To accommodate their schedule. And also, we talked through this audit report as well, and we were able to work through some of the interpretations of it, or to make sure that we both have full understanding of what the recommendation meant. But I am happy to report these were great recommendations. We've already implemented all of them except for number 3, auditing the trends. Great recommendations. One of the options is resuming audits of the transient room tax, and we can, hopefully you can hear me, I'm trying to project.
Maybe centralize it. Sorry for that.
usually we contracted with an outside auditor to do this work, but it's also kind of, from what I hear, obviously I wasn't here at that time. It can be a little sporadic about the service and how you can get it. One of the benefits and options can be if the committee approves is that the internal auditors actually approve that function, because we need some hours towards that, because then it helps, they can balance our internal work with external and have to work through a third party for that. So there could be benefit in our tax office fully supports. I also lastly heard, I think,
We were identifying lots of customers, so we would have to. What is the program?
Mini rats is our new tax software.
Mini rats?
Mini rats, yeah, and yeah, the tax app was great, because it's doing a lot of work. It's doing a lot of background work as far as scrubbing the internet and scrubbing websites to see if these listings are there and how much people see the list, checking the compliance, as well as this.
If you have a gap there, but you have.
So, I'm glad to hear that there is this kind of counterbalance to it. But I do wonder, this type of scenario, whether it's something that can be a lesson learned. If it's the change of the software vendor, times of change are obviously in the higher risk. That's probably the time that. Is there anything that you can learn from this that we might share with the department, so that when we got that type of data, it doesn't result in I'm just trying to think about that moment at a time.
Generally speaking, I think that's one of the benefits of COVID is, you know, referring back to COVID, even though that was correctly, but it's related in that, even though COVID is going to be your first, but how else can we do something different than what we know? So, in this case, for work, it's like, well, what can we do with resources? How can we utilize the new software differently? Another benefit of it, to the point is, because the role of finance in this is authority to tax, right? We should go through two. It's not a permit, right? From the planning, right? Not CBD. But what we have noticed in this new software, it notifies us of potential. But we do have a staff member that still has to physically look at each account. They're looking at the pictures, and then that's when they will refer certain properties over to CBD. Do they have permit? Is this a permitted? The unit that really is safe to be able to permit. So that's a whole other aspect of it. So that's getting to the question of looking and utilizing the software beyond initial license.
People forward will already less than this.
Process, people, right? We've got wonderful people, but.
What kind of program, if any? Also, we just bought a new one for the tax. The other thing was, has the county heard, or have you guys heard any similar recommendations from financial process and federal language? Even not informal.
There might be some informal ones given the client directly, but there's not been a formal man.
When I think about what the internal owners are looking at, really this process is a very clean. So like, coming from the software. Like, I think what they're really focusing on revenue.
Jody, your questions from folks who are not here. On the next one.
Sorry, I think it's, the audio is just so light a lot of times that I feel like I'm missing things and then it cuts out at elements. And so that it's, you know, a little hard to follow up. So I caught some of the presentation, but I might end up just ducking off if it's,
What we're gonna
I'm not
do,
really productive.
Jody, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and, with chair's approval, we're gonna go ahead and take a 5-minute pause so that we can. switch
Okay.
To the overhead mics, so that hopefully you and Kathleen will have better audio on your end.
Yeah, because it almost sounds like you, Aaron, like the people that are closer to like the TV is what I can hear, and the further the way it goes down the room, that's where it gets weaker.
Okay, yeah, if we could just maybe.
Because like I would expect I could hear the people in the middle of the room best with like the mic in the chair there, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
Okay.
So thank you.
Our meetings, so I'm thinking like we need,
Yeah, so
Can we
we'll,
flip to our meeting system?
we're gonna log off just really quickly, and then bring it right back.
Oh, awesome. I'll take a 5-minute break too. Thank you.
Just mute it. Oh, okay. If anybody's online. Kathleen, is that for you there, our audio, everyone? Thumbs up?
Yeah.
That is so much better.
Good, okay, okay. Then as soon as our cake break is over, we'll proceed.
I'm very jealous. I'm jealous of this cake break. I wasn't aware.
I think there's some on that.
Good thing I didn't, totally disable those.
Thank you for being here. Are we good now?
Yeah.
Everybody's on board.
Take those a little. Do you want my frosting? That'd be too much. It is pretty. Thank you.
Take her.
My people who eat my frosting are my favorite people. You want a gold star for the day? Not for your awesome presentation and your internal math award. But fair enough.
You share that? Not yet.
Oh, look at that. That's,
Hey, you're not supposed to see that yet.
is that the South Sister blowing up? or- Hmm. We had an earthquake, government camp
Really?
last night, yesterday, it was a small one, but yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
You need this, ejected?
Oh, yeah.
You wanna
let's do
eject
that.
the folder on the left or that way?
That's pretty good.
Really good.
Okay.
You okay with it? My partner Buzzy cruises Twitter and sends me all these ridiculous and hilarious tweets. It was a good one.
This, that was very good.
That was. Ain't too much of that, though. Once everybody gets settled here, I'll go ahead and get into our next audit topic. Yeah, the next one. is-
The main event for the new
Main
reports
event.
today, right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Recently, just hot off the presses as of
Yeah.
what, 2 days ago, 3 days ago now?
Yeah,
Yeah, so county continuity of operations plans assessment. Just a little bit of history for me, when I was preparing, to interview for this position way back in January of 2022, and I was looking at the audit plan then. I literally had circled this on the audit plan as an interesting topic that I would like to do, and somehow it ended up in my lap, so. Initially, I think I spoke with Scott a little bit, but it was initially designed as a departmental gap analysis to see how each department fared with their own continuity of operations plan. But as we started the audit planning process, it became more clear that a more high-level assessment would be the best value to the county. They're in attendance today, but we were helped out greatly by the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office Emergency Services Unit. They provide us some initial guidance and have been a great mechanism for feedback throughout the whole process. So I wanted to make sure to give them some kudos and shout out, even though they're not here. So continuity of operations, or COOP, not co-op or chicken coop, but COOP. COOP, it's just one piece of an overall emergency management system. That system can include things like continuity of government, emergency operations plans, IT disaster recovery. Most people think of an emergency and they think of, South Sister eruption, some major traumatic event. Obviously, that will be a disruption to survey. There'll be some response elements like sheriff's office and road department, most likely will be responding for our county. But this could be just as much of a disruptive event for some of our services in the county, especially tied to some public expectations. If the fair or the landfill can't process payments because the internet's down, that's gonna create some problems. Health appointments canceled because the system's down, permit inspections delayed because we have no website. These are just some examples of the impacts to service that one cut cable can have. So continuity is defined as an uninterrupted connection without change. So how does a county provide service without change during a disruption? The way they do that is through planning, right? So they identify services that are deemed essential, right? These are essential in continuity are those that cannot be delayed. So unfortunately, internal audit is not essential because our work can be delayed. Road department, sheriff's office, health services, these are things that cannot be delayed. They are essential. So in 2017, the state at that time had the largest statewide exercise. Deschutes County attended that exercise, kind of simulating what a Cascadia event, major earthquake in the valley would look like. That exposed some pretty significant gaps in continuity for all agencies, not just the county. But lessons learned, we brought that information back, and in 2017, continuity planning became an item of work for the county. Most departments and offices finished their planning late 2019, early 2020. So for this audit, FEMA has a tool that's perfectly suited for this type of assessment, using their continuity guidance circular, which is kind of the go-to book for continuity of operations plans. This tool is called the Continuity Assessment Tool for non-federal organizations, so it's very much specific to us. The tool scores progress towards a comprehensive plan that's scalable, flexible, and adaptable. The scoring provides not only an evaluation of progress, but also of maturity along these three pieces: initiating, building, and maintaining. And then also these strategic elements individually, which create this acronym in the emergency management system lingo, POETI. It's planning, organization, equipping, training, and exercising. So here's the kind of just a recap of the scoring that's included in the report. Overall, the county's 4.9 out of 10, which may seem a little bit harsh, but it is where we're at. And basically what it does is it takes each of those maturity pieces and averages them out to get that overall score. So when you break it apart, we did fairly decent in initiating it and building the plan. What we haven't done very good at is maintaining it. The 3.5 shows kind of that everything was paused, right, for the last, since 2019, 2020, when they were finished. And then when you break it down even further into the key elements, the POETI elements, planning is the development of the plan. This includes, process identification, communication strategies, succession, delegation. 4.5, so our plans were a little bit not up to par. Organizing, that's human resources part of the continuity of operations. This is like rosters, roles and responsibilities, things like that. A little bit higher. Equipping, these are the hard goods. These are things like, backup snowplows and IT infrastructure, and purchasing laptops instead of desktops, things like that, things that are more portable. It also includes things like budgeted reserves, right? So like 911's dispatching system, they have a reserve set aside to replace that in whole if they need to. We did really strongly in that area. Training, that's the preparedness for the event, South Sister goes off or the cable is cut, we have some work to be done there. Expectations should be known and understood by all staff so that if an event happens, everybody knows what to do. Exercising, that's the testing, right? That's putting it into a test tube outside of the live environment, seeing what will break, seeing what lessons we can learn from it. Again, we have some work in that area. So, yes, sir.
Can you check the chat? I just thought,
Oh,
I saw another chat.
Check what?
Go in there. I don't know what they are, but. I was just checks on. Yeah, we
Okay.
know. Okay. Just that's it.
and again, please interrupt me and
Yeah,
ask any questions as they come up. But I'm glad to answer them. So we ended up with 6 recommendations based on this assessment. First, in the area of planning, the county planning was greatly impacted by the inadequacies of the state system that we had to use. Have to use it, we chose to use it. One example of this that I put in the report, the county clerk has a statutory requirement to have continuity of election functions. They have one of the most developed plans for that in the county, but that continuity plan for elections wasn't able to be translated into the state system because of system limitations and conflicting instructions. It was just, the system was poorly designed and executed. But we were very lucky in the timing of this because that state system that's very clunky and inadequate is going away. Just last week, we got notification that the current system will be end of life actually next Friday. They're shutting the switch off. And then July 21st, they're turning the new system on. That's yet to be understood what that might look like or feel like. or do.
Week after.
So it's just as those two systems, it's 2 contractors that are basically they're shutting off.
Remember how many people in Oregon's Obamacare signed up? Wasn't it like 0?
Yeah,
It was 0.
I can't recall.
It was 0 because my niece tried to get on.
Okay.
It worked.
But again, we haven't yet to see what that new system will look like or feel like or act like. So that's why we put in the or into our recommendation. So if it's insufficient, again, we do have other alternatives. We can just make Word documents of our plans. We can do spreadsheets for our plans. We can create some kind of internal form. And then upload those so that our external partners, our other counties or anything like that, if South Sister does erupt and another county wants to help us out and send aid, they know what our resources are, they know what our capabilities could be. So those things are known. That's an important piece of the system is that information sharing with all our other counties and agencies.
You
So
just have to make sure that Nathan is here in Shutes County, correct?
he's a
He is
key
the
piece.
best- He's the best.
I do not disagree, yeah.
yes.
So Sergeant Nathan Garrity is one of the folks that works in Deschutes County Sheriff's Office Emergency Services Unit.
Okay.
Work with it, and he is an all-star.
Yeah.
He is,
He's #1 in the nation, or the state next to and patients, I believe.
yeah, he's an expert in all areas of emergency management. He's a great asset for the county. The second recommendation also in the area of planning, the plans lacked some very key elements that were reflected in that first score. Again, greatly impacted by the state system, which wouldn't translate these into the plan very well. But that being said, these are again best practices for continuity of operations. So we didn't have rating risk assessment for any of our essential functions. We didn't have any, what the business impact analysis does is strategize mitigation efforts for any of those risks. We didn't integrate with any of the other emergency management systems. There was no formal way to account for staff. If something happened at the clerk's office, they would probably know pretty quickly, if everybody was there. Health services with 200 some odd staff, it's a little bit harder to count for everybody.
412.
412, thank you for correcting me, Tiger. And then there was also no acknowledgement for disabilities, either public or employees. and ways to do reasonable accommodations, in case of we have to move backup facilities or, I think the DA's office was doing trials out at the fairgrounds for a while, and they did have reasonable accommodations there, but I don't know if those were.
But they shut that down.
I know it's closed down, but. And then there was some limited planning in business process analysis, which is basically just describing in detail what essential function is and who's expected to do it. And then the roles and responsibilities were there for some continuity staff, but not for all staffs. Needs to be some additional work in those areas.
What location were you saying has been closed down?
Oh, so during COVID, the DA's office was doing trials at the
Oh.
fairgrounds.
At the
Oh,
door.
I see.
For quite a while, yeah. And I actually had jury duty there for a while, and I was actually pretty impressed with the setup they had. I mean, it was pretty well laid out.
Yeah, it was, we mainly set it up with state courts.
State courts,
Yeah, so the facilities department kind of led setting up the physical. part of it
right?
there.
So, but it's an example of something kind of, and pandemic was the disruption of how we pivoted operations and found some solutions to those challenges, so.
Well, if we really have the 9, as someone who has lived through a bunch of earthquakes, it's the aftershocks too, that are really, well, then people are gonna be so frightened if it's a 9.
Right. Yeah, let's hope it's not.
Well, it's how many years overdue now?
Yeah.
Quite a few.
So the third recommendation we made in organizing. So again, the pandemic changed priorities in business for a lot of departments and offices. Regular COOP meetings, of course, were the first to go as everybody was trying to navigate the ongoing pandemic and the changes that were occurring in that. But the bright spot were, methods that were like concepts in these continuity of operations plans, like remote work or home dispatching, were put into practice, right? And we vetted those out now. So that was kind of a bright spot. Also, the county HR and emergency services unit, they have this process for roster updates that is very accurate and seamless, and they continue to do that. That was the bright spot as far as the updating of the plans. The rosters were continuously being updated, and I checked all of them. It's like less than 5% error rate, which for as many employees as we have, and as long of a time span as that is really remarkable. So our recommendation was to reestablish those planning meetings to review and revise the plans according to FEMA guidance. The fourth and fifth one were both in the area of training. Again, the plans were created and finished just prior to the pandemic, but elements were used kind of ad hoc. Each department kind of maybe pulled at some of the concepts that I already alluded to, but none of them formally activated them. In some of the FEMA training I've taken during this audit process, one of the best phrases that I heard from the FEMA trainer was activation is not scary, right? To activate our continuity shouldn't be a major event. It shouldn't be like some large scale South Sister erupting. Even if a cable is cut, let's get our manual processes out. Let's dust these plans off. Let's put them into action. This shouldn't be a end all be all emergency situation to get continuity of operations going.
And were you here when the cable was cut in Tacoma and we were out? I can't remember, were you an employee then?
I could have been an employee of the state. I
No,
could have vaguely-
it was here at District County. We had no internet for a while because of that cable.
Well, I think the state was also disrupted,
Probably
if I
so.
remember right, because I think I was over next door and it was like, yeah, it was a major deal.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that COOP plans, the causation, why COOP plans weren't used is pandemics weren't even included as one of the activation scenarios. Like it was just kind of out of mind at that time. It was probably not really thought of as a possibility. And also it was COOP plans were very limited to the people that were planning them and putting them to paper. Most staff didn't have any awareness of them, so it was very limited as far as who knew about continuity of operations. So our recommendation was kind of twofold for this issue is to expand the scenarios for activation and then also provide some training wholesale to all county employees.
Was doing another tabletop, I know there was a tabletop that was canceled. Is
I'll
that
get to
part
that
of?
here
Okay.
shortly, Daryl. Yeah.
Okay.
So the last recommendation was about exercising. Again, like Daryl made mention of, we did one stand-up, one tabletop exercises after each plan was completed.
Mhm.
And there was a scheduled all department continuity of operations exercise scheduled for April 2020. But of course interrupted, but here we are, June of 2023, and that has never been rescheduled or retried. So our recommendation is
Do that.
to do exercise,
idea.
whatever that looks like, right? Whether it's standalone or whether it's all department, just to restart that process of regular exercises. And so, I mean, in kind of closing, this audit, very similar to cybersecurity, kind of provides a way to assess where we are, where we'd like to get to. Is to identify some areas of improvement. I think the lift to get to a higher score isn't that great for a lot of departments.
Mhm.
A lot of effort has already gone into some of these plans. They just need to be finished and then exercised and updated regularly. It's not a big, it shouldn't be a huge burden to departments, in my opinion. And again, to kind of circle back for my intro, this was a topic I was interested in way back when I was not even with the county, and so I kind of soaked it in like a sponge. My knowledge base can now provide a resource to the county in similar ways. Nathan and some of the services to be a guidance there for
Awesome.
operations and management going forward. So it was a fun audit. I really appreciated you providing the opportunity to do it. Any questions or
Yeah.
comments?
I have a comment / question.
Yes.
So I'm sure we've probably all heard about Curry County. They had a ransomware attack and it's just completely, it's been catastrophic for their systems. And I've heard, just, I guess it's scuttlebutt, but I've just heard that the state is considering some funding for counties to work on these continuity plans. And you guys are far ahead of where Curry County was, but just a heads up, or have you heard anything like that?
No, I mean,
Additional state funding?
IT department has a disaster recovery plan in
Yeah.
place. I mean, that's kind of, again, it's part of a whole emergency management system.
Right,
It's kind of, it's part and parcel to a continuity of operations plan, but yeah, a little bit different. From my discussions with the IT director, well, I think it wasn't the director at the time because we were transitioning, but they do have a plan. They do have a disaster recovery plan. They do test it with their vendors and have kind of regular backups and insurance of that. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to navigate any kind of ransomware, just based on the fact that we have a plan in place.
and I'm just thinking
Right.
about the state funding, whether it might be not only, ransomware and cybersecurity, but the greater, broader continuity funding.
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity is an area that we touched on earlier that has, a lot of value to be gained there, so.
We have so many new, because of our new IT director, she's implementing a lot of changes. And we do have what is it, insurance, we started it at 19.
Yeah.
Not that it's going to help, but maybe it will.
Yeah, I don't have that much of a concern about the county's exposure, just
Well,
because
the
I've known.
Telemed really gotten, they got set back quite severely, and you would have thought that Coos County would have seen what happened to Telemed. And, it's too really too bad they haven't.
Yeah,
At our GFOA conference, they said that having insurance for ransomware is actually makes you a target.
Oh, good.
Really?
Because they know you'll pay it out.
Uh,
So I don't want to see that.
In the criminal mind, it's.
Well,
Man, how
get
it works.
Save some money.
I know a lot of insurance companies are.
Makes sense.
Well, it's getting more and more expensive. Yes, is there stuff, yeah.
Summer.
Just on the administrative end, I haven't heard anything about that funding, but certainly it's something we can keep an eye out for. I think it would be helpful to have any resources to invest in this. And, you know, as a part of follow-up to this audit, we've been talking with the Sheriff's Office Emergency Services Unit about ways that we can partner with them because they are a small team supporting a vast number of needs and emergencies. So sometimes for them, tabletops and planning get shifted as well
Right.
and other things. So I think it's on our radar and we'll keep an eye out.
Cool.
I just have a comment and then a question on the second part. It might be interesting as a follow-up to look at the continuity of business operations plans that each department wrote early in the pandemic. So Tom Anderson at the time required that of department heads in early, around probably May of 2020.
Yeah.
And how those as standalone kind of groups might relate to the overall.
So I might have missed that or maybe didn't present it correctly, but that's exactly what we did. Yeah, we took each department on its own, each plan on its own and scored that using that FEMA tool on its own merits.
Was that
And
specific-
then aggregated it and averaged it. So,
specific to the pandemic ones or the overall group?
so everybody but the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, that version 1 that was established under Tom Anderson, that 2019 plan, 2020 plan.
Well, this was a separate one. There was one written.
Oh, really?
So
Okay. I wasn't
Each
part of that.
department wrote a pandemic specific continuity of business operations plan specific to the pandemic. Around, I think it was shortly after we were meeting, sometimes daily, and starting in March. And so probably in April, May, and I know leading up to, actually it was prior to the budget hearings that year. So leading up to budget hearings, those were submitted. So it might just be interesting to follow up to see how those relate to the COOPs that were established prior to the pandemic, but
Yeah.
didn't have the pandemic component.
For sure.
And that kind of followed up on that gap.
Yeah. Do you know if there is a repository of those
I
somewhere?
can, I think I know where those are. I'll
Okay,
probably-
that would be very interesting. That would be a very interesting exercise to
Yeah.
see how those plans stack up versus FEMA's guidance as well. Yeah.
And they were kind of they were on, we were all, scrambling to react to the.
Yeah,
pandemic as-
exactly.
As we were closing down buildings.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
And the second part question was, what did you notice, or is there an interplay between COOPs related to the pandemic again, between COOPs and the setting up of the EOC? So the EOC component is kind of part of COOPs, and that part was carried out and with, during the pandemic, countywide, visited the county.
Right.
Did you look at how, even though there wasn't a pandemic specific component to the COOP, when the EOCs were activated in response, how that played out in relation to the plan?
Our scope was very limited just to the COOPs. For this audit, we didn't incorporate, again, most of the COOPs that were created didn't include the EOC or any of the other emergency operations plans within them. And so we weren't able to really capture the interplay between the two on its own, just within this audit, but yeah,
Can we add that to future audit plan?
that's what we'll discuss later. I
Yeah.
mean.
Just don't want to lose track of that
Sure.
idea.
Sure.
Cool.
So I've got another comment, and it's related to the remediation plans or the management responses. This feels like, a vulnerability. And I think there was it sounds like a lot of good work done. And Aaron, thank you for pointing out, I think, the initiating and the building phases were good, right? There's still work to be done there, and it's the maintaining piece. And I think, if an event like this were to occur, it's that familiarity with how to execute on it, not just from a few people, but from a lot of folks, that really makes the difference, right? It doesn't do a lot of good to have the equipment and the resources if you're not able to execute on it. And so just looking at the management response, I know we don't typically require set dates to have things completed, but I wonder if that might be useful in a circumstance like this, to just have some more detailed plans and a very specific plan to get us, you know, have a benchmark. Hey, we want to accomplish, if we're at a 4.9 now, we really commit to being at whatever we want to get to by X date. I just wonder if that might be useful for this type of risk. I don't know if the other folks have thoughts on that. Maybe I'm on an island there. This just feels important enough.
There'll be a work plan with dates, but then maybe, that's a good suggestion, maybe tie it into a reassessment at some point.
Yeah, again, this is a tool that FEMA's put out that's similar to cybersecurity that then management can re-engage with and utilize to do the similar scoring and similar assessment, kind of without audits. I mean, we can provide some guidance and some methodology to it, but it really lends itself to being some kind of, ongoing effort from management standpoint and kind of a self-assessment manner going forward that could be very beneficial.
Still need to work on a work plan, right? We still need to develop
The timeline for response and anticipated follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, I sent out the work plan. There was no dates or anything provided in any of the responses by the sheriff's office or any of the management as far as the dates or timelines for that. I mean, the follow-up will occur in 9 months and we'll reassess, maybe where each department is at that time, and we'll have a better guess as to what the new system's capabilities are. And I mean, that will lead itself up to a big.
Yeah, I think that would
a lot of the departments and offices.
Yeah.
Within the county. I mean, if it's capable of doing everything that FEMA recommends, then it's an easy ask to just start uploading your information into that and designing your plan based on that software. If it's not, then it might be a bigger ask.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a more manual process.
Yeah.
It's really gonna depend on the software.
I think I'll comment too. I think the timing of this is great coming from the pandemic, because now we have the
Yeah, it's
opportunity
good
to
time.
sort of reset and do those exercises again. But I think you could also think of the pandemic as one big exercise.
Real
When you
yeah,
look
real
back,
life.
if you look at why tabletops were done, et cetera, it's
Huge.
because
Every
all,
day.
literally every department in the county had a hand in responding to the pandemic. Like some were, for us, even facilities, it was a huge focus every day and of our amount of time. So that, as we look at the next, major opportunity that's going to come and not knowing exactly what it will be, this was great experience for those of us who may still be around, who went through it once. It was, in a sense, one big exercise. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of value to that, even though it was a very difficult time.
Yeah, and I think I touched on that a little bit, maybe probably not, didn't give you guys as much credit, but I mean, the county did great at continuing to provide service in the face of this unprecedented disruption.
And I really wasn't looking for.
No, I know you weren't, I know you were asking for it, Lee, but I mean, I
have
think,
some cake.
I think it does deserve to be noted,
Yeah.
how well the county did.
Yeah, and just looking at how, the mass vaccination plans, all those things, but what was interesting is we had exactly what we would have been looking for in an exercise.
Sure.
Yeah.
We had fairgrounds, health, sheriff's office, St. Charles outside entities, so in a way, it's probably better than the exercise we could have.
There's dynamics in a live scenario that you couldn't mimic. So yeah, that's a really great point.
Is anyone going along behind that to do the assessment and make recommendations from that?
There
was no
within the
there was no-
EOC.
yeah, there was
The
no
EOC
coordinated
has a
effort.
really robust follow-up process.
Okay.
And lessons learned.
Great.
In tabletop, so I know there were some really robust evaluations, after action evaluations, and it's kind of built into their processes. And I wasn't a part of the EOC.
It's really specific to the component too. So like I know for communications and outreach, we did a very comprehensive look at that area and what did we learn and the documentation around that, to Lee's point. So that's a key part of that structure that it provides for that inherently.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so it just needs to be put into the plans.
Yeah.
Just needs to be translated in there.
Do you feel like this internal audit helped kind of bring the continuity planning together from, you know, the entity-wide standpoint? Like, did it, I know you, sorry, what am I trying to say? Individual departments are looking at their own continuity plans. And this was an assessment of the county as an entire organization. Do you feel like this internal audit helped move that planning forward? Was it already happening and you're just doing an assessment, or did the outcomes and recommendations from the assessment help move the whole process forward?
I think would be the latter. So there was,
Okay.
it was literally, these were done and in place prior to pandemic hit and literally everything stopped. Like,
Sure.
we had EOC going and you guys were doing real world reaction to it, but it wasn't necessarily an area of continuity of operations.
Okay,
As far as written plans.
okay,
So I think the timing of the audit and with this transition of the state software, I think the audit will restart the engine and restart some ongoing meetings and planning
Okay.
surrounding continuity of operations going forward. I think timing wise, I mean, I don't know how he does it, but he hit it on the head with this one. I mean.
it's magic.
It was.
Right.
I mean, the timing couldn't have been better to re-engage, especially all the lessons learned after the pandemic and make improvements. So,
Yeah, and that question, I think, ties into, I'm asking that question because it ties into your recommendation about whether we keep this audit and follow-ups on this audit on a rotation. And I heard what you said about that there are tools from FEMA so that they can each do their own check-in and view
Self-assessment.
progress, self-assessment. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking from the city administrator standpoint and from commissioners to help ensure that all of that is continuing to move forward. That this audit, if we continue to do it every, I don't know, 3 to 5 years or whatever would make sense. If that would just make sure that everyone and countywide were staying on track. So is that kind of where you were
Yeah,
coming from too?
makes-
You said it
Yeah.
much more eloquently, but
Well, no, I think that could be a great way to do it, or are there other tools, you know, some type of risk assessment or kind of internal assessment that isn't necessarily audit. You know, that the program itself could be rating itself and saying, hey, where do we stand? At this point in time, but yeah, certainly internal audit could be that way to do it.
Yeah.
do you guys think that's a good use of resources?
I will answer.
Speak candidly.
I will answer the way I generally answer these things is that once we've audited it, it becomes management's role to implement what they think is appropriate
Okay,
and maintain that. And we're a resource. So I'd say I've done audits 20 years ago, but I'm still a resource. I'm still a touch point for contact or something I was involved in, and I can be a resource to people. That I find much more helpful, I guess, in a way. I'm not using all my audit time for that. I'm using kind of what I call follow-up time, making sure that they're on the same rails that they should be. They're kind of got some guidance along the way if they need help. This topic and cybersecurity kind of go hand in hand with people want to keep touching it.
right.
And I struggle with that because it's like, okay, what value am I going to add to it? And it's, yeah, you're going to have different scores, but I've shown you the tool, I've shown you the process.
Mhm.
Now it's up to you to run it. Now, if you need guidance from us on what we did last time or whatever, happy to do that. But to redo the same audit over again kind of loses value in my mind.
Yeah.
And there's other things that the county, I mean, we'll talk about the list in a little bit. There's always lots of topics. And so it's a question is a balance. This is a great topic that spanned the whole county. Every department got touched, which is awesome. And so, again, there's a lot coming out of this, and it was very timely, and it's a great one. But again, do we need to keep doing audits of it?
Maybe just
Again,
follow-ups.
maybe follow-ups, maybe something down the road on a different topic, or
Right.
maybe it's emergency plans, or maybe it's disaster plans, or it's other things. So
But is there anything built into the counties kind of programs now that would allow us to assess our preparedness on this type of scale?
Interesting, and I'll let you weigh into it. I don't think so. Yeah, I think there's not a process or a specific position that would inherently have that as part of their scope.
It wouldn't be,
So,
Garrett,
so
is
to
there-
Aaron's credit, I mean, Aaron went out, found the tool, discussed with the sheriff's office the appropriateness of this tool for this particular audit. And put it in place, did an evaluation. No one else was gonna do that. So again, it's up to us that we identified an area of risk. And then we determined some methodology and approach to figure out where we sit. And so again, I think it's a perfect setup and, kudos to Aaron for his work on it. So.
Yeah.
And again, I think, like Whitney mentioned, I mean, the sheriff's office, emergency services unit, it's a limited resources. There's just 2 of them. So asking them to reassess every department for the county on
Not
a
realistic.
rotating basis, probably at this point unrealistic, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that there can't be. This tool is fairly intuitive. I mean, to go back to that screen, they give you pretty clear guidelines as far as where things fall within the scale of 1 through 10. So it's not without. Lost my word.
it's okay.
It should-
I'm tracking with you.
It's not a difficult thing to ask continuity planners that are familiar with continuity of operations already, or department heads that should be integrated with the process, to then be able to self-assess, where are we can go through this, we go through the list,
Mhm.
where are we on the 0 through 10 scale? At this point in time, when they do their annual review, it should be, you can make it part of that process fairly easily.
That was my question. Frequency of review written into each coop. I should know. I should
Yeah,
remember, but
it does have
seems like
it does have an
it's-
annual timeline as far as for review. And
So you're
that
re-
is best practices from FEMA as well as an annual timeline.
So you're
Just to
reviewing
have-
it, seeing where you are and each year, so you see what kind of progress you made over the last
So
year.
what's changed, I mean, things are always in flux, right? Changes, we get new systems in, we get new people in, so, everything needs to be reviewed, tires kicked and revised accordingly. So,
That's important.
yes.
From the county administrator's office and probably from commission too, but is this planning enough of a priority that it warrants a position to drive it?
That's a question for the budget committee and the board.
Yeah.
To answer in terms of that allocation of resources. Currently, we have the function in emergency services, and then it spans out and there's those touch points, but there hasn't been a proposal that I'm aware of to date that
I would say probably not. I mean, we want to work with Nathan as the emergency manager. We might be able to ask somebody in our county administration to help assist, but I don't see it as a full-time job.
Okay.
And the other reality is the work is more the work of the organization. So if we hire a full-time person, I could see them saying, all right, let's time to update, time to do tabletop, and the rest of the organization is not going to be able to keep up.
Okay. Okay,
How about the state funds,
right.
right? I could, maybe that's a way to help with that too.
Well, that'd just be funding the position, but it sounds like in reality.
Yeah,
it
but in
wouldn't be
reality.
Effective.
yeah, Wouldn't be well served, yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
Anybody on the screen there needs to
There is a chat.
discuss this? Is there a chat?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a one up there on chat.
I think that
Was that the old one?
Oh,
Oh, Kathleen is signing off.
Okay. All right, then I guess we move on to the next item or the next 2 follow-up reports that we have. One, assessor's office cash handling, and the other initial cybersecurity assessment.
All right, so we got key follow-up reports done this quarter. Daryl said assessor's office, cash handling and cybersecurity assessment. Assessor's office, initially they had 10 recommendations within the report. 7 of those 10 were completed shortly after the issuance. So we just did the follow-up on the remaining 3 to capture their progress towards that, and happy to report that they are 100% completed as of the time of the follow-up. Kudos to them.
Doesn't get much better than that.
Right?
Yeah.
Can't ask much more. Cybersecurity, a little bit bigger ask, of course, because there's just a little bit more breadth to it. 3 recommendations within that report. Since the issuance of the report, the county is contracted with a managed cybersecurity service company that regularly assesses and identifies vulnerabilities. And then of course, we've had a change in leadership, bringing on a new IT director. Tanya and Tanya. Tanya Mohammed. She came on in March. So there has been progress made towards these 3 recommendations. Anticipated completion date has been set at July of 2024 for these. Because of the timing of the follow-up, this will be included in our global at the end of the year. So we'll get another check-in before July, see where they are as far as progress towards that. Again, a big ask. These are large policy-driven topics, so it takes a little bit more time. But still, there's progress being made. It's good. That's all I have. Any
Questions on that? Either one of those items? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. County leadership recruitment changes. Eric is here. So, Eric, anything on that?
Probably the main update that I think the audit committee is aware of is the transition of the solid waste director. Tim Shimke, the long-term solid waste director, retired about a year ago. We went through a recruitment and identified 2 top candidates. One was Chad Santola, who was the number two position in the solid waste department. Then the other candidate was Tim Browning, who came from Monterey, California. Chad said, "This is great, but just so you guys know, I'm going to retire June of this year." And so what the county ended up doing is hiring both as co-directors. And it has worked out phenomenally well. The 2, Chad and Tim Browning, have worked side by side over the last year or so, kind of each focusing on different areas. Chad's been focusing on the next not landfill or opening up the landfill. Tim has been working more on the day-to-day operations, along with changes that the state is requiring related to recycling. And Chad is retiring at the end of this month. In fact, we have a retirement party with Chad and David.
Okay.
At the end of the month, both in this building, and then we'll do an after party that's not county related, but it's Silver Moon. So Chad will be retiring. Tim Browning will assume the full role as solid waste director. And again, it's been great transition planning. At the time, we kind of kicked around the idea. Some people didn't, were like, "Oh, how will that work?" And mainly because of the 2 of those individuals being able to work so well together. But it's been a great transition, and we feel very confident. It's been great training for Tim Browning once Chad retires. So that's probably the main transition, other than, of course, the internal audit position. Other than that, we have the full department heads.
Well, closing one landfill and re-signing for a new one is no easy task. For sure.
Yeah, when I started the county 15 years ago, there were a couple of things that were big ones on the list, and that was and continues to be one of them.
I would just add on to say that the county recently launched a new podcast, and last month both directors were on and kind of discussed their evolution of passing that baton and what it's looked like for Chad to have more than 20 years with the county. So that's worth a listen. And as a sneak peek to this month's podcast is Aaron and David talking about the work that internal audit does for the county. So they might both be of interest to this group.
Yeah.
What's the overall scope of the podcast? Is it county administration?
The podcast is looking at the people that work at the county and really trying to bring a human element into talking about the services that we provide and the work that happens. But one of the members of our staff is doing a great job. And Robert, you also just were on talking, have you done budget yet? Or are you?
No,
That was a different, but he's really bringing some innovative storytelling techniques to how he's doing that. And I think for a municipal podcast, it's good
that
to
out.
listen. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Thanks for letting us know about that. Yeah. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. Any questions? Eric? Okay. Biannual audit plan discussion. David has that.
There you go. Middle left,
To share and.
middle left.
Middle left, that one, all the way, far left. Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay.
So this is a rather lengthy process in general. That's why I only do it every 2 years. And I'm doing it for my potential successor. And it's a plan. And so I would probably my first caveat would be like any plan, it's able to be changed. And you guys would definitely be involved in that process. But the idea is to kind of set us up with some big issue topics, and then as those topics are, the timing is right and we move towards them, then we would then hone in on the risks and the approach and scope and everything else to try to stay within range. So one of the first things I do is I try to figure out the hours. And so one of the things I look at is I look at our historic administrative overhead time, vacations, how much audit time is spent, how much time is spent follow-up, kind of get a rough amount of estimates. And I did that for Aaron and I, because we both roll up our sleeves and do the audit work. And so I came up with, total of like 2,400 hours. And then not knowing what's going to happen with the transition, I estimated for fiscal year 24, 2,200 hours, just to give a little more flexibility with things. And I'd say 99% of the time we don't finish everything because things get added. I'm overly aggressive at trying to get things done. And so that's okay. It just shifts on and moves on. And we either that, or sometimes we revisit an item and say that this is no longer relevant. So we've done that a number of times. I look at risk assessment. So again, down here, the 10 county meetings, budget development, I get an idea of where the big issues lie in terms of how often did they use the word homelessness? That was a fairly big topic. There's a lot of those across the way. And so again, you're trying to think yourself, well, how can audit get ahead of that? How can we be in the right place at the right time? And it's trying to figure out, well, what's in our perception. Usually it's usually a pretty good one. I also try to balance things. I don't like to hit departments like I hit finance, I think pretty hard for a couple years with this munis audit during post-COVID, and then that was cash handling. So it's like, give them a rest, and same thing like with health services. We're doing a big audit right now of them. Wouldn't necessarily need to do another big audit of them in short order. So again, but for instance, most of my audit plan will look at specific departments or overall county items, as well as some specific items. But I try to look at timing. I try to look at to make sure that things are appropriate There's a couple timing relevant audits in here that are based on input from departments. So like they say, well, it'd be nice if you could look at the May 2025 election. Well, then that was very time certain. The election occurs and you're gonna have to plan ahead of that. So those things occur. Does everyone have a copy of this that we're setting out?
Was it attached? No.
Nope, I just finished this like 2 days ago or something, so. Go. I don't think copy. Anyone? Oh, plenty of copies.
Some grabbing one.
Mhm.
Robert, you got it ready?
Yep.
Darryl, you got it?
Yes, sir.
All right, so. I'm kind of walking through this at a higher level than this is. But this is the document that usually I try to get approved and what we use to manage by. And so that's what we do today. I got asked for you guys just for input. So it's a fairly project approach. So you look at carryover audits. So those are on the top of the page. There are some continued yearly types of things that are like fiscal audits. So a long time ago, I realized since we're probably the main person going out and reviewing departmental fiscal practices, that if I didn't do it like on a cycle or touch them like once every 8 years, things just kind of get out of whack. And so it's more about, it's probably one that could be turned over to management or maybe even finance, but again, it takes a look, every now and then. But continuing to do that, continue to have hours in there. I added, as Robert discussed, a yearly, what I'm calling a non-audit service to audit TRT taxpayers. And so this would reduce our outside charges for the external auditors of about 15 grand. And we do it in-house, and I'm thinking within 200 hours, we can probably do that pretty well. And maybe over time changes or whatever, but we'll reassess it periodically. The other thing that we've been doing almost since I've gotten here is we always try to do what I call computerized audits, where basically we're looking at county systems through the computer, looking at holistically areas that could be improved. And it's been consistently a great return on time and effort. And so I think that's a value. So I schedule one of those every year. Sometimes I put a topic on it. Sometimes I leave it open to be discussed. I updated the hours, and most of the audits in here you'll see will come from some kind of input from somebody. So in the in-process carryover process right now, Aaron and I kicked off an audit. When did we kick it off?
Started
In March?
March, yes.
March. Behavioral health workload. And Aaron's right in the middle of field work still. So we're spending a little more time than what I originally budgeted, but I think it will take about another 350 hours to finish it. Facilities and property management, fiscal controls. That's one of those cycle-based fiscal audits we haven't got to in this fiscal year. Same thing with the district attorney. We did a transition audit, but it didn't look as deeply into fiscal controls. And then we have a computerized procedures audit where we were thinking we'd look at compensated time. It's an area within Nova Time that came out of our analysis of time management leave, or is that the right term? Vacation and sick leave. So that's the stuff that kind of rolled over that I thought was still appropriate. Things we could do for fiscal year 24. So the areas that came up as important topics were review of third-party administration of high-cost medical claims. So I'll give you a brief a brief encapsulated review. Our self-insured health insurance fund has been going through our reserves at an alarming rate due to high claims. And I'm not comfortable knowing that I don't know. And so I think auditing those high claims, I've done it before. I think my successors can do it as well, but trying to make sure we understand where these claims are coming from. Are they calculated properly according to our plan? And seeing if there's any issues there, because if you don't nip those things in the bud, they just keep drawing on you. So that's one I think would be a good early audit in the fiscal year. One of the things, talking to IT, the new IT director, I talked to her a little bit about the fact that we were doing some internal software development at the county. And that's a kind of a high risk thing to do because we got away from it for a number of years. So my concern was that, are we doing everything we're supposed to do as a software developer? She seems supportive of that, so that's good. Our human resource department brought this idea forth in terms of looking at how they audit and maintain the variety of inputs that they do on a periodic basis for personnel, timesheets, pay raise changes, evaluation, all the different dates and times and dollars. It's usually something an external auditor will look at in some shape or form, but we would use basically some technology to also leverage it and look at for anomalies and things like that. So, so that one's interesting, and it's one where we get some comfort level that the data in Munis is accurate and complete. So, this idea came from Whitney, our communications director, looking at. So we've developed a number of responses to language needs. And so translation and interpreter services, how we pay people stipends. Are we doing that effectively? Is it really doing what we think it's doing? Is it scalable? Is it, is it got good equity and effectiveness? What you'll find in internal audit, much more so from here going forward, is a focus on equity. It's in our standards. It's something that we need to be mindful of. So, I mean, I don't think you're going to see that term go away. You're going to see it more and more often. Recruitment and retention in the post-pandemic area. I can't tell you how many times we heard the input from departments during budget about retention issues, recruitment issues, cost of living in Bend. I mean, whatever it is, this can't do it all. This audit will have to be scoped, but again, try to address something to try to get at some topics within recruitment and retention. So, okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna smattering on 24, 25, and then I'm gonna show you what there are other options. They're also on the pages you looked at, to talk about whether you want to flip something. So nothing's in stone. So fiscal year 25, I got requests from Fair and Expo, who's doing things differently with alcohol sales, to look at the county fairs, alcohol sales, and how that works. So again, an enterprise fund asking for help. Enterprise funds generally are a little more riskier departments. So not only do I have this one for the fair for 150 hours, but I also have their concession events for the events that go on during the calendar year. Courthouse construction project. We have a very large courthouse construction project coming online soon. The tune of $45 million plus or minus inflation and whatever else happens. I could foresee doing some kind of audit in some shape or
Just 40.5.
40.5. Okay, great. I was already.
I mean, it's only 4.
I know. 10%.
We'll probably be there by then.
All right. So anyhow, I see an idea of looking at, there's another large construction projects happening at the county. This one has been probably the most visible and most discussed one. So I could see spending some time and effort in that area, looking at it. either pre-contract, during contract, change orders, any number of things. So again, something could be done there.
You know what you'd be looking for? What kind of risks you'd be?
Again, yeah, I think we'd have to look at the, whoops, can you back me up there? Okay. Yep, too far. One more, there you go. I mean, typical construction contracts, you're looking for things like cost controls, how they're charging you for things, what they're tying to, you know, inventory, quality of the materials, inventory. I mean, there's lots of broad kind of things that happen in construction projects where they bill you at a higher rate than they're supposed to, or than that cost them, and there's all kinds of different things that, but we have a great owner's rep, and I think, you know, that's a great control, but it's also making sure that that's working effectively. So again, I don't know how we would approach it, but again,
And
as
that recommendation, that was based on conversations that we had.
yeah,
And then we recommended that to the board to hire an outside owner's rep. And so our team internally, we have a project manager assigned to it, but then we also have a third party owner's rep that's providing oversight.
yeah, so that's a huge thing. And so again, that might diminish this particular project. Maybe we look at a different project, but again, something like this would be good to have on here. Our clerk would love to see some transparent visibility to all the important election controls that they have. And I think from a public standpoint, that's a really good light to shine. I think they do a remarkable job, and this might not be one of the most earth-breaking audits that brings lots of findings, but it could have some. But if anything, if it's validating what we're doing, that would be awesome for people to hear, you know. And again, our independent nature, looking at shine the light on our elections would be good. Assess effectiveness of houselessness response. So again, the other term that's been happening so much around for a while now is our houselessness office. How is that doing? So again, maybe this is out 2 years because we're kind of at a stall at the moment with our director leaving us, but taking a look at this, how are we doing? Is it effective? What have they decided to do? How are they doing it? How are they measuring it? So again, Portland did a lot of really great. Portland and Multnomah did a number of audits on houses. No one has an answer to this question, I don't think. But can we look at how we are can be more effective with what we're doing? So again, looking at something there. This one is one that I kind of pulled out of my head because we have law enforcement districts that fund our sheriff's office, and I'm not aware anywhere along the way that finance has helped the sheriff's office determine how to charge districts for a variety of invoices. And I remember looking at invoices and like, for one particular invoice, it might be 30% of the cost would go to law enforcement district 1 and 70% would go to district 2. And then another invoice, all of it would go to district 2. And another invoice, 60% went to this one. Very specific, but it lacks guidance and methodology of mine. So I'm thinking the risk there is that we just raised all our rates to maximum levels. Are we kind of not aware of where the cost should be? I mean, I'm just not sure. They're different taxpayers. District 1's different than District 2. So are we being mindful of that? So I think that one would be interesting to do. I don't know what the sheriff thinks about that. That plays a little bit into this, how receptive, but it's also more about the districts than it is about him. So that's interesting. So again, we're other potential topics. So again, I put the other ones on the schedule because I'm given that opportunity, but there's other great topics. These are some smattering of them. So I had over 100 ideas given by departments and yourselves and management. So these are some that had some traction with me in terms of what I was seeing. Outside employment. Again, you heard about the police having outside employment. We have a lot of outside employment issues with health services, I don't know that we have as much with our sheriff's office. They don't have quite the same audience as police do, but
Is the primary risk there conflicts of interest? Is that what we most?
exactly, conflicts of interest, how are we managing it? What are we allowing and not allowing? Capital equipment reserve methodology, so are we properly establishing goals and expectations for how much we need to save? For things, we're very budget oriented, which means we always have scheduled what's gonna go pay out the door. But these, I'd say solid waste is really good at it because they know when their schedule of equipment that they're gonna replace this big a piece of loader every 15 years. But maybe a department doesn't do its HVAC and it gets paid out of facilities. Or something like that, or there's other big equipment they might have, a big printer or a big something or other. Every department's a little different. So again, looking at some of the capital reserve methodologies, how that works. Transitioning of light fleet to electric. This came from Nick. Yeah, what are we gonna do? When are we gonna do it? When does electric fleet happen? That might be a little too far,
Well,
not
it's-
within our 2 years.
It's something we're in the middle of right now.
Okay.
And we're already making investments in the infrastructure. Certain departments have already purchased some vehicles. But I think it's a good topic because there's a lot of unknowns about the future of electric and there's a lot of upfront cost. And so those two things together at the department level are a little hard to ferret out. But right now, facilities is working really closely with the road department. And a couple other departments with the road department on the fleet management side. And looking at what we need to do on infrastructure, but then with other departments that want to transition to electric fleet. And so it's a really thorny, challenging issue.
Well, and you mentioned the thing that always sets off flags for me is departments are doing that. County's not guiding it in a proactive way to shape everyone's usage of maybe electric
Yeah,
vehicles.
and that's probably why it's a good.
Yeah, it could be a good topic, yeah.
I would say that departments are doing it in the same way we do. All fleet.
All
So
fleet, yeah.
it's not any different than all fleet decisions are currently being made.
But another thing is just for people to know from a budget standpoint, fleet is budgeted by an allowance moved from their department into a fleet account. They have a little kind of a bucket of funds to buy new vehicles with and stuff like that and do maintenance. So they have these resources already set aside. They can spend them how they want. It's just their choices and they have broad discretion on choice. So like CDD, if they want to have an electric vehicle, they could have an electric vehicle or they could have a truck.
Right, they currently. Yeah,
They decide.
we're headed down that road. So they have one currently, one on order, and we've installed a charging station for both.
Yeah, so now we need charging stations and the infrastructure and all that stuff. So where do we put it? Do we put it behind gates? Do we put it out where the public could maybe potentially use it? I mean, those are all potential policy decisions. So, yeah, so anyhow, a potential topic. To not leave solid waste undone. I mean, we've got Negus, which is our transfer site in Redmond. They're under construction or nearing construction, and I don't think they probably don't have an owner's rep for that one. I think they're doing it themselves. And so that one has a little more risk. This one was on my list last time as a possible, and it's body and auto cams at the sheriff's office. Are they effective? How are we using them? Are we got sufficient policies and practices around usage? I'm not aware of us not having any problems, but it's just an area that gets a lot of publicity when it doesn't go right.
It's still relatively new and heavily evolving, so. I think
The thing I have heard about this is the size of data that they have to retain and provide to public record requests has gone through the roof. Because everyone just there's so much data involved when somebody starts the videos button. So county, through a number of years has had a lot of limited duration staff, and how are we managing it? A lot of them have turned over to regular. Is that effective? Was that intended? How are we supporting that? Is that general fund dollars? Is that regular funds? We haven't looked at restaurant services in a long time. I think we looked at some of the fiscal areas of that, but this is more looking at a very, very big area that's kind of moved up around here because we have all these food trucks and all these new events and stuff like that. So equity review of wages and benefits, just to see if how we're staying on that. Centralized procurement, looking at what are the best practices? What's the transition path from non-centralized to centralized? Does it start out with a centralized manager? How do we bring that from departments? How do departments coordinate that with finance? I'm curious to know. I don't have experience in too many other places, so I know what centralized procurement looks like in full-fledged form, but we've always had something that's kind of a hybrid. So I'd be curious. That's kind of more of curiosity.
Is that something you're hearing from the board that they want or administration, like to move to that? It's just a question I have in general, like.
Can you
moving
hit me
towards-
back? Sorry, I keep clicking
To
on the wrong thing.
centralized.
Not from the board so much as I think it's come up a number of times, like when do we do centralized procurement? I'd say mostly from like department heads, kind of people that are like, what's that look like? Or how do we be more effective with our purchasing? We've got copiers, we've got gas, when do we, we don't have the resources like admin. For a while, we did a RFP for copiers and we did an RFP for gas. But we don't have the staffing to keep it up. And so would this position keep it up? Or how do we effectively use what resources we do dedicate to it? So it's kind of looking at the glide path. How do we make this happen? I mean, is this getting people from out in departments to be more centralized? Maybe we pick, a contract manager from health services and bring them in-house and have them do it for the whole county. And, I mean, we have a lot of skills, but what I found also is that a lot of new employees get saddled with doing an RFP for the very first time, and then they don't know what to do. And so again, that's always a problem. So another big one is, oh gosh, clicking on it. Landfill construction. So I should have made these all like little icons or something. Landfill construction is a big project that's coming. It's probably a little late, a little further on. It's going to be too late for this particular cycle, but I wanted to get it on the board. It's another construction project that's going to be really big. And solid waste's expertise is more in building cells, not building buildings or building a landfill setup per se. They can do the cells, they're pretty good at that. But other construction, like constructing the facility and stuff like that, I think we need facilities background.
And we've already had conversations.
Okay.
About. I'm involved in the siting committees.
So code compliance, so with houselessness and some of the county properties, we have sometimes multiple county departments working that from different directions, whether it's property management, health services, solid waste, community development. And the question is to look to see how we're doing in terms of coordination and effectiveness. Already kind of mentioned this one. Benefits from indirect cost plan adherence to federal rule. Again, I think you're working with health services to do some looking at the indirect cost plan, but there's some benefits to be had. Looked at it before, and we're not that far off from having what they call an approved plan. But it takes some work. So again, what would that do? Would it effectively, the dilemma is that at the end of the day, are you going to achieve any more by having an indirect cost plan or not? Are you just pushing dollars around from an accounting perspective? Or are you going to effectively change maybe the decisions and how decisions are made? I tend to think if we had an indirect cost plan, we would have more transparency to the costs being borne by the general fund to support grants and or other projects. And so again, I think that's a piece that we totally miss because everyone sees the big picture of the asks, but they don't know why it's being asked. And And they're not asking the question, well, how much are you supplementing this with? So, that's an interesting question.
Just real quick, a piece of that is without a federally approved indirect plan, then you just automatically take a de minimis 10% overhead that you apply to grants.
Right.
If you had a federally approved plan, it could be a higher rate or it could be a lower rate. So it's, there's, it just depends. So, but
I'd say,
even
yeah.
without a plan, you
Yeah.
at least get a minimum 10% reimbursement from your grants.
Right, and that 10% covers Board of County Commissioners, finance, IT. A lot of times those things might be considered direct costs, but they aren't because they're through an indirect cost plan already. So, and then the other big one is internal department overhead. So like in health services, they have, I don't even know how many people in their administrative function, but that gets spread out across the departments. That's another approved internal service fund cost. I would guess that they're easily into the 30 to 40% overhead. And they can't charge any of that. To grants that actually allow it, they can't even charge it. So
I haven't seen any indirect cost plans less than 1%.
yeah, I
From
haven't
the
either.
plans that I've worked with.
Yeah.
I have from another count from previous county, because when you look at the look back period,
Mhm.
sometimes if you overcharge in one period, then you have to take that credit to reduce the New Year's rates. And so that's what makes it
Oh.
below the 10%.
Okay.
If you over assign the percentage, because you're doing a forward look and then look back.
This one has been coming up a little bit, we're in the midst of trying to be more effective recruiting, and bonuses comes up as a way to retain people, or putting them on like a bonus retention of, you give you this bonus and you have to last for 3 years. And so what does that mean? Is it effective? Looking at that, that could be part of an audit too, as well. Yeah, and the cost of it. And there's all the Me Too factor, of course, that goes with that. It's like, if one department gets it, then the other ones want it too. So,
I see a nice balance for a lot of these potential topics for more traditional methods with some of the more analytical methods that you've been using. Yeah, it seems like.
well, and again, if again, like I said, we generally don't get down to the list that's not on the plan, because we're all so busy trying to get the plan done, and the plan has plenty of content. The question is I guess for you guys, is if there's something that really resonates with you, that you think I'd like to elevate that up and do an audit in the plan, and then which case then I'd ask, well, what should we pull? That's your guys' role. So again, I'd say, there's all good stuff in here, and we could change it too over time, but as a starting point for getting this work plan going for the next 2 years, I kind of need some level of approval from you guys.
I think it's starting, it's fine. I don't see anything on the list there that really creates the need to change anything from here to replace something from there to here.
Okay.
As we go forward and work is being done, it's always subject to change, like you said.
Right.
I
That
would like to
works for me.
prioritize the equity review for wages and benefits.
Equity review of wages and benefits.
Mhm. A lot of organizations have been doing that, and it's kind of a pro and con, right? Two-edged sword, where they're identifying issues, but then they have transparency with those issues and transparency with what they're doing to correct the issues. I could see that being value to the county.
Yeah.
So I'd like to prioritize that one.
I think that's a good one. The other one that does jump out at me is the body and auto cameras.
Oh, yeah,
It's,
it is.
that just feels like an important one that, similar to elections.
Right.
Is very much a public interest area, and has the potential for pretty substantial impact.
Public relations perspective.
Oh, just on the development, before we get too far away. This plan doesn't include transition, so I add audits if we have transition audits for elected departments. there are a couple things that I would call, this kind of comes on the same heels of your discussion with food plans in terms of what's our resource, what's our ability to either create an audit or a follow-up or what kind of service. So I've gotten requests to do like something I've done before is like look at our alien allocation between the sheriff's office and parole. We're perfectly suited to do independent work of that, and we could do it. But I've already done it. So is it just a revisit? Is it a follow-up? Maybe it's a follow-up. Same thing with cybersecurity. Is it a follow-up? Is it just something I can help them with or my successor can help with? Because I'd rather not do the same thing twice, you know what I'm saying? So, and then anytime we do non-audit services, I want you to be aware that under standards, we try to be very clear, and I'm suggesting here that we have an MOU between finance and us, identifying how our roles are going to be aligned so that, you know, we're independent and we maintain that independence. I think since we're auditing the taxpayers, it's not like we're actually auditing our citizens to some extent and coming back to finance with findings, and they're able to do what they do with that. I think it's totally an independent project, but also because of privacy issues and confidentiality issues for TRT, I don't want to make it an audit and transparent in that way, because I think that could be a problem for finance and or legal. So I'm thinking right now in terms of, they would probably require legal to look at it, but we'd do some kind of non-audit service for that if we did that. And then the big caveat is scope. So, I mean, if I give 400 hours to something and we scope it for 800 hours, something else has to give. So my goal is always to say, try to keep the scope, try to gauge the scope to fit the amount of hours given. I mean, as hard as that is, you try your best to scope it as best you can. We always will spend the time it takes to do it, but if we're not tight with the scope up front, then it's hard to kind of rein that back in later on. Okay, so now back to these. So I don't know if we could get the ones that you guys are interested in, maybe we can get a straw poll of how much it is and how much support there is.
I don't know if it needs to move, but from an internal county perspective, the best practices for moving towards a centralized procurement, partly because it's a really big change. And I think most of the voices that have been heard so far are from the smaller departments that don't regularly do procurements.
Right.
And so I think it may be helpful to just have a broad look and, in a sense, in that area that you live in, sometimes where you're helping a department make a move, in the sense of it could be potentially helpful for Robert as those practices are set up with the new procurement officer, to have somebody just helping gather that information and look at how that position could be most helpful and best utilized.
The other piece of it is Robert
I don't want to speak for you.
Robert alluded to the fact that this is addressing some of our audit recommendations in the past, but it's also a position that could actually do this research. Because I think they're going to be in a position where there's what you call the certification that they have, a procurement specialist or something.
Public procurement buyer. I mean, there's
Yeah.
many different public procurements. I mean, what I kind of mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor the point, but it's not that and I don't know if someone provided this directly else, but you know, I mean, I've looked at other counties before, and it's all over the board of what they are. I'm not saying we need to move to a centralized procurement, right? But I think also once we hire a person in here, they could start some of those sorts as well. And then, I mean, they need to get centered and established first, right? And then we could start moving. But it is initially to start, because I don't know anyone that for a size of an organization is fully centralized in this role. Because even with finance, we have finance people in each of the departments, right? Even though we have some centralized finance functions, but the large departments are going to need that resource.
All right, well, let me do a straw poll on each of these, maybe that's the easiest way. So outside employment, any hands for that one? Could we move up?
We want to see it online too.
David, I don't think it
Yeah.
needs to move up, but another element to me on outside employment is knowing about that could sometimes help HR if there's workers' comp claims or things, because sometimes, there's a hearing loss claim, but the individual likes to self-contract out as a logger on the weekends, where did that hearing loss derive from? And if you don't know about those claims, they can hit county policies solely.
I have a question about the straw poll.
Okay,
And my question would be, are we considering, as we vote, are we considering the capacity of the audit staff? Meaning, like, I feel like outside employment is really important. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say it's more important than these. Like, I don't know what I would.
that's I think that's the second road is, okay, which topics are main topics that you guys will maybe consider, and then do you think that's more important than what we have in the
Got
plan?
it. Okay, thanks.
And
So,
how much
Or we
time-
could strip it down in some other way, if you just wanna, if somebody feels really passionate about one or do or another, we could just try to address those directly, I don't know. But my sense would be is find out which ones, it would be helpful to me to know which ones you guys think are important. And so, I don't know, and then maybe Jody and, do we still have Chuck online? I don't know if Chuck's the iPad, but maybe Chuck can put a thing, thumbs up or whatever for each one of these.
I'm still here.
Okay, thanks, Chuck.
Another quick question, have you, as these came together, do we have much understanding of whether there might already be an adequate process to manage these kind of things? Like, do we know that there's a gap in outside employment, for example? Do we know that there are challenges in some of these other areas? I presume that's why they're on the list.
Yeah, they're on the list because there's some inclination that
Yeah.
it might be a risk.
Okay.
I mean, there's some departments that I'm more aware of it than others, but some of these are projects that are specific to a department and some are more holistic.
Yeah.
So I would say, if we had, let's say, we said body worn cameras was the topic that we really wanted to have, I'd probably do a switch and replace with the sheriff's law enforcement district one, just because they kind of dovetail with the same department. And again, it's we got to make choices,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, it's like it's a plan. We need a plan. The fiscal ones are pretty good. How about a straw poll on who's good with us providing the TRT tax service to finance? Is everyone good with that or not good with that?
I have concerns.
Okay,
I'd like to understand where that's coming from
yeah.
and what your guys' thoughts are.
I mean, I think part of it is that, they're reaching outside the organization to get audit services, and then the other part is. It's probably something we could be probably more efficient at and give them more service than they're getting right now. For the same amount of, effort.
Any downside from your perspective?
But
Any downside to?
I don't see a downside in
Yes.
terms of our independence. I mean, I say. It does verge on the level of kind of compliance type of work. Which is probably not as exciting as doing fresh audit work, performance audit work.
Are there other non-audit services that you guys are doing, other projects? that are
We
non-
try not, one of the edicts from audit committee has been trying not to do non-audits.
Do less, yeah.
So I'm feeling very protective of your time because I'm looking at these other potential topics and several of them are very important. And I'd rather have you focusing on these. And having an independent do the TRT audit.
Anyone else feel that same way? I mean,
I'll say that makes sense to me, but not knowing how you would put together the interest it is. But certainly makes sense. For me, one thing I always ask is, what can only we do? Well, the internal audit stuff is stuff that you can only do.
Right.
If this is a service that we can, given there are constraints on the time, if this is a service that can be done from the outside, then maybe you should be doing what only you can do. But that said, I don't understand the drivers and all that, so I don't.
Yeah, do you know what didn't Judy share with you that kind of like the lack of value we were getting with the external auditor doing? Wasn't there?
There was just some constraints with being able to access some of the data, especially from the bigger players like the Airbnbs and the RBOs of the world. That Judy thought maybe as an internal audit, we could leverage our independence and kind of our governance a little bit better to get that data better and be able to provide a better service for those people that are using those kind of third-party services for reporting. You know, they had been using the same person for like 5 years straight, and there was kind of getting to be like a little bit of just kind of a routine, she felt like, and she just, yeah, I mean, she from her perspective always thought it was kind of off limits to ask us. And so she was kind of excited at the fact that we were even considering it. So that was Judy's, the tax or deputy tax collector.
Gotcha.
So.
I mean, it's possible we could make them audits. But we would have to probably pull some of the more specific information
That'd be
out of it.
worse. I definitely would not do that. I would-
So that I don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah, the appearance of that.
My suggestion would be to contract it out, but reconsider who you're using.
Mhm.
You know, maybe doing another RFP, have more input into what their process is gonna look like. And let them, I mean, the county can still leverage and use its weight to get the information you need, hopefully.
Yeah, one of the audits I could see that would be effective for us to do actually would be to try to compare the land maps, the technical information about land maps to see who's getting whose taxes. Because it's very easy to be off the border of the county or the city. And maybe the tax from the county is being sent to the city by mistake or something. So I don't know if that's ever been really looked at from a real specific review point, you know, okay, we got this renter and are they in the city or county? Is somebody looking at that specifically? Because I could see the city looking, oh yeah, they're the county, and then somebody else looking at, oh, they're the city, and we both dropped the ball.
It'd be a nice way to partner with the city.
Right.
And that's something the third party could do as well.
Yeah. But again, I think of that because of our skill sets of working with data, I think that would be one of those things where we could do pretty effectively.
Completely agree. And
We-
yet,
I
we
feel
had
like
third
it seems like lately with the AUPs, the auditors or like the firms are being like hand tied, like they'll only do exactly what you list, like.
They want to be very specific with agreed upon procedures.
Yeah, it's like.
Yeah.
If they can't perform that step, we didn't do it. You're just like, okay.
If you aren't smart enough to write it into the procedure, then they're not gonna.
Yeah, I
Evaluate.
just think they've gotten very, very, very picky. So it's getting harder to write those. But we can help Judy do it. I'm saying it's not
okay,
possible.
here's a compromise.
Suggest some.
Internal audit could do that third party TRT if they're given another FTE. And then we could pick up a bunch of these other potential topics which are very important. And so if we have buy-in from county administrator's office and can get buy-in from commissioners, I know we just got another FTE, but I'm completely willing to support adding another FTE if it means accomplishing.
Well, knowing how much trouble it was to get this FTE,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be able to run that one down.
Oh, it'd
the
be very
flagpole.
scared, yeah.
But still, it's one of those things that, yeah, I think if we start adding up all these things, yeah, we could use another person, do more stuff.
Mhm.
That's always great. But again, the county is also very conservative, and when you're saying you're gonna hire an auditor, well, maybe you can't hire another XYZ person because you're doing that.
Unless you justify and can quantify the value.
Yeah.
Right.
I think those of us in the room we know that the value is there.
Yeah, it's just harder to
How do
quantify.
you show
It's
that?
really-
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm loving that out there because I'll still be an advocate for that, but
Yeah.
in the meantime, I'd rather have you guys focusing internal, even if external is less efficient and trickier.
Okay. I mean, and if,
And if that's only me, that's okay.
No,
I think that's
I
a,
think that's fine. Yeah.
I think that's a really good
That makes a lot of sense.
okay,
Uh-oh,
Jody, what do you
listen,
think?
somebody got-
So
Chuck? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Running short on time.
Same thing as what the others said. I mean, I agree with Summer that when somebody is in a department, you want them dedicated, you know, to that department's mission, but not knowing to some of the background on, you know, why that decision was made or why it got moved that way. Can't speak to that piece of it. So
I'm sorry, I
200
didn't,
hours.
didn't hear the question. Somebody asked me a question.
2 years, that's
Will
four.
you, will you
Okay.
repeat your question for Kevin?
Oh, so Chuck, it was about whether or not we support the idea of removing the non-audit service from the work plan. Because it is non-audit service, it's not an audit service that we can provide, so. That makes sense?
Well, if you can't provide it, I guess you'd need to remove it, huh?
Well, yeah, and again, I thought. Again, I was given some leeway in developing these work plans, and I think it had a good balance of providing an internal service to another internal service fund. And hitting an area that I think is important, so. Again, that's why I put it there, but I'm happy to pull it, so that's fine.
I really don't have the background and the understanding to recommend one way or the other on that topic.
Other thoughts?
It doesn't impact me, so. It's Judy.
Right.
And it doesn't stop us from working the department to figure out outcomes and.
Okay.
Okay. So if I have 200 hours more each year. And I didn't scope some of these, but that could be like,
yeah, I'm fine with that. I haven't heard anyone speak up
Okay.
negatively. so
I think you guys are all in agreement on that.
Good.
I don't have it.
You don't have a vote.
Yeah.
So I mean, if people are interested, the other one I heard some support for was equity review of wages. At least Scott and Summer. Is there support for that to
Do we have a
look at?
sense of how that relates to HR's current practices? Have you had a conversation with Kathleen?
Nothing specifically, I think, on it. I mean, I think they're always looking at pay equity because it's such a big thing these days.
Because we do have some new practices that were put in place in the last year that significantly changed how we make offers. So that could impact whether or not it's a viable, whether or not how it stacks up against some of these others in terms of value.
Mhm.
Yeah, and again, it's a part of any audit process is to figure out where is you're more effective putting your time. And my guess is, if we did the survey work, the risk work, the looking at it, we'd either decide to come back to the group and say, well, no, this isn't a good topic, or, oh, we need to do this, this will be good. So I mean, again, I think giving them leeway would be I think a nice thing.
That makes sense.
So I'll put that in place of one of those non-audit services, since I think that has some support. And we have the time. Any other of these topics? I mean, what about the body and auto cams? We're running up on our 3 o'clock time. I want to be respectful of you guys' time, but
I do think that's an important one. So I know I support that being added.
What kind of things would you want them to look at? Like, what are the risks, buddy?
I think just the consistency, the clarity of kind of when and how they should be used. Are they being used that way? And I think there's the potential to look at, and I don't know the county's policy in detail, but I presume there are times when those cameras are on and when they're not on. Are there outcomes that might differ between those instances? I think would be an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. Is that what you guys are thinking too?
that was the original idea of looking at it. He's looking at it for, it's an audit that's been done other places. And so again, we'd probably scope it from the perspective of what's the biggest risks in that area. And being turned on or not on is kind of a big one, is it automatic? It hears a voice, it turns itself on, or is it somebody has to push a button?
Mhm.
And are they,
What are the policies, right? I mean, there's
It's
the physical piece
right.
of like
Right.
how to do it, but yeah.
There's also some use of force regulations and policy around with body cam
Yeah.
footage as well that could be a piece,
Mhm.
depending on scope.
It might be also interesting to look at from a asset standpoint, the cost, the retention, and then the cost of retention of video. Cost of the upfront costs of the equipment, and then also staff time to manage. Just as an understanding, not as good or bad, but to know what does this total investment look like? Have the operational look that's critical, and then have the cost impact look. And risk, because there's risk on both sides.
I like that one. I'm not as I'm just me, I'm not as passionate about it as some of the others.
I'm fine replacing
non-audit service.
the law enforcement district one with it.
And what exactly was that one?
That one was looking at how we account for and segregate peak costs. I've never heard that it's a problem.
It's by org.
And
Joe tells us, but I don't know either his methodology for it.
well, I can tell you, looking at invoices, it's all across the board with it's down to the invoice level. And so, like some divisions, like let's say you take car division. They have a perception of how many cars are in X, so they divide things. And they, but again, it's looking at the methodology and are they doing it correctly that addresses. And again, I don't know that anyone's ever brought it up as being an issue. It's just one of those snaggling things that I've kind of noticed, and I was like, oh, maybe we need to look at that at some point.
Would it be interesting to get sheriff's office input on either one of those, and which might be more?
I had
useful and
body
helpful?
cam on the kind of short list before. I never got. I've tried to reach out to sheriff, and he said he was gonna come up with some ideas, but he wasn't forthcoming before this meeting. So I think the body cams one is pretty safe in some ways, because we're not poking at a problem, we're poking at how do we improve and how do we look at this proactively. So I mean, from my perspective, I think either one could be fine, and we could wait and see how it plays out with the sheriff. If it's a couple years down, I mean, we might have even a new sheriff by then, who knows, but might vary. So
I'm gonna say something controversial. You guys do with it what you will or not. Depending on how material this is, if you mention it as a concern to the external auditors, it might be something that they'll spend a little bit of time on.
Yeah.
But then it becomes more. So just that.
I mean, they're issuing separate financial statements on law enforcement districts, so.
Yeah.
I would hope that they're taking a good look at it, but they're kind of low fare in terms of risk from their perspective. They're just a funding mechanism. So the money's coming in and it's going out, and they have expenses that are submitted from the sheriff's office, and it's all supported. It's just somebody looking at it from a different lens, looking at to see how effective is it, or how methodical is it? Does it make sense? That's kind of what I was looking for. We haven't had a lot of good fiscal leadership in sheriff's office, I don't think. And so again, and finance isn't asked, I don't think, a lot of times. And so again, it's a good way to crack that open a little bit, and find out. But I think the body cam one is from a public perspective, what helps the public. I think see that would be a more public benefit. Yeah.
Hey, David, along with that question or observation, I can't go back up on the slides, right? I can't go backwards. But in 24 and 25, which year had the homelessness topic? There it is. Just wanting to make sure that with the sheriff's office, I bet, they're probably going to be maybe identified in that one as a partner that's going to be, using their time. You'd like to be mindful of the time you spend on each department. So just if we move a body cam one, if that one's are pretty labor intensive for the sheriff's office, just knowing that we'd be hitting them a lot, maybe potentially.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, I'm always mindful, as kind of Robert says, we're mindful of when departments are busy, whether it's the assessor's office or finance, tax, or clerk's office. We try to be mindful ahead of those to be scheduling something that makes sense and doesn't, because the audits take time, not just our time, they take staff time on the auditee side. So we're always mindful of that.
Sorry.
So we basically, we could increase some hours on body cam, which might be needed because it's only set to 300 hours. Or I could put some time in on something else. Any thoughts on that? Any of these other topics that? So I've heard, so we got body cam. I think Lee's working on light fleet. I'm not sure I want to poke at it at the moment. Outside employment could be interesting.
The reviewing of cost effectiveness, like potential cost savings of centralizing some functions. Is another one that I feel like is important. But probably not more important than the other things we have on there. I'll just throw that out.
The other
If
piece.
you want to help justify a new position.
Yeah, there's just so much on the.
Thanks, Summer.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Summer. All right, so what I'm gonna come back to you guys with is a amended plan that has none of the non-audit service in there, and I'm gonna swap out the body cam for evaluate methodology. And then what I might do is reassess the hours I have and just make sure I can take that 200 hours and just make sure I've buffered some of the other projects and make sure I have enough.
So the body cam would be in fiscal year 24.
Fiscal year 25.
25, okay.
As a
And,
replacement for the
and then
law
you're,
enforcement districts.
and then replacing the non-audit services in fiscal year 24, what would you be doing?
That one's the equity review of wages. and
Okay, so that's
benefits.
just a straight exchange.
Straight exchange.
Gotcha, okay. All right. I'm clear now.
All right, sound good? You want to vote on it? As you still have quorum, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Sure, if we
just
do
do those.
quorum.
1, 2, 3. You need 5, and you got Chuck in, you got Jody on there.
All
So
right, so
you have.
why don't we make a motion to accept the discussion draft list for the audit plan for 2 years with the changes mentioned, removing the non-audit service from fiscal year 24 and replacing that with the equity with salary and benefits. And then in fiscal year 25, replacing the evaluate methodology for changing the law enforcement districts with the review of body cams.
And I'm also removing non-audit service fiscal year 25
And
and reassessing hours where needed.
Okay,
I'll move for approval there.
I'll second it. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, well, we're way behind time, so everything else we had was pretty minor fare. There's a status report if you want to see it. We had a great time at our conference. Our plaques we got behind us, if you want to take a look. And that's probably the only other thing I'll bring up.
Anyone have anything else for the good of the cause before we adjourn?
Congratulations, Dave.
Yeah,
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
David, yeah, congratulations. And Scott, thank you.
Scott.
Yep.
Part of
Yeah,
our group.
Been a pleasure.
Okay, we adjourn at 3:19.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Judge. Judge.
Yeah, Jody, thank you. Judge,
Thank you for figuring out the audio in the middle. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Thanks to Whitney.
Yeah.
Man, it's.
Turn these in.